Do you like being a gangster? London in the 1960s. Everyone had a story about the Krays. They were twins.
Do you think we look alike?
Reggie was a gangster prince of the East End. Ron Kray was a one-man mob.
Your brother is violent, paranoid schizophrenic. What I'm trying to tell you is that he's off his rocker.
Wow, no.
It was time for the Krays to enter gangster legend.
London is going to be the Las Vegas of Europe. We need someone to front and someone to muscle. Salud, come to Philadelphia.
Is she a nice
Girl, we'll get it for you.
I prefer boys. Italians. Sometimes Greek, but I am not prejudiced.
You got some balls to admit that, kid.
Me and my brother, we're gonna rule London.
You could go straight.
Life isn't always the way we want it to be.
Things are getting completely out of control, and the American mafia may also be involved.
What exactly are you doing about it? We're going after the Krays.
You won't mind if I fight back, will you?
Crime is a business. You don't want a war.
I do, actually.
Listen to yourself, you're nuts!
You hit me.
Yeah.
What is that? I come here for a proper shootout. A shootout, right, is a shootout! Like a Western.
Your brother, he's a loose cannon. We need you to do something about Ron.
I can't do that. He's my brother.
I think so. That's right. You got it right there?
Oh, yeah,
One more here, come on. And one more over here, guys. Thank you. Perfect. All right, thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Kids with dreams and no sense of reality and survived, and we're here. Those are the kind of moments in a life that you just don't get over.
So without any further ado, enjoy the show.
Thank you.
I always get a little nervous when you have to show a film here because in many ways it's like bringing something home to the family.
Yeah, it's shot in Toronto, but you're trying to make it look like New York. I said, yeah, that's great. You know, that's not bad. Because the city's like an actor.
Premiering a movie that took me 20 years to make in front of 2,000 people makes me want to cry.
I mean, there was a time that I can remember when people say, well, film will die. It hasn't and it won't, and it's great.
On the TIFF channel of YouTube. For the 7 media outlets that have been pre-approved to take photographs today, we ask that you do so from behind the 3rd row. Otherwise, no photography is permitted. If you're interested in a photograph from today, please see the press office. And lastly, there's volunteers in the room with microphones to assist you with your questions. Please state your name and your media outlet. Thanks. Our moderator for today is Eric Kohanek, and it's now my pleasure to welcome the director and members of the cast for the film Legend.
Well, good afternoon, and welcome to the press conference for Legend, a festival gala presentation that tells the story of the Kray brothers, the notorious gangsters who dominated London, England during the 50s and 60s. Legend had its festival premiere last night at the Princess of Wales Theatre. No, Roy Thompson Hall, of course. Roy Thompson Hall. It had another screening this morning at the Visa Screening Room at the Elgin Theatre. If you have any questions, we have volunteers with microphones. So stick up your hand, we'll get a microphone to you. I'll start things off, Brian, by introducing the panel. Beside me, we have Emily Browning, who played the role of Frances Shea, the girlfriend and eventually the wife of Reggie Cray. Beside Emily, we have Brian Helgeland, who wrote and directed the movie. And last but not least, Tom Hardy, who took on the dual role of the twin brothers, Reggie and Ronald. I'm going to start things off, Brian, by asking you, this is your first time at the festival as a director. How does it feel, and how was the premiere last night?
Yeah, it's always fun to show a movie to an audience that hasn't seen it before. In a big audience, you don't get that many big crowds to see a movie. It's hard to do. So that was great, and it was fun to do it here.
Talk a bit about what drew you to the story of the Craze.
Yeah, I was very interested in how wide-ranging the story was and how little was actually known about them, as much as has been written about them. And Frances as well, who's very much the ghost that haunts that story. And the fact that it was real, they were real people and did things that were, if you invented it, it would stretch credibility. It was all an interesting thing to get involved with it. And then just slowly went from there into trying to figure it out and tell our own legend of the film and try to round off the extremes on either end and try to find something in the middle to examine.
And so when you started out, this was based on John Pearson's book. Is that what was your main inspiration for this?
That's what they had. Working Title had bought that to stake a claim in the world and things. But in my due diligence, before I wrote, I read a lot of the books about them and did a lot of, went to the places that still existed where they had been and talked to people who knew them and primary sources and things like that. So it became a very big journey as far as to try to sort it out as best as I could before I wrote the script.
And then when you talk a bit, too, about the casting, I understand you originally had Tom in mind for the role of Reggie, strictly as Reggie.
I still do. The great thing about a movie is you bite it off in little pieces. So if you step back and think of what the task ahead, it's enormous for everybody. But everything's done in small doses. And I didn't know Tom, but I had seen him in a film called Warrior. And it's a much rougher around the edges character, but I thought there was something about that character that Tom played that was Reggie-esque, if you will. And I sent Tom the script to read, thinking that Reggie was the lead of the two and that we had to start with Reggie and see where it goes from there, but that was it. Had dinner with him, and it was really obvious to each of us that he was attracted to Ronnie, and I was wanting him to play Reggie, and we were very kind of dancing around each other, and at the end of the dinner, Tom basically...
Dancers.
Yeah.
It was a little dance.
I'm not as trained. I'm more freestyle.
It's more freestyle dance, yeah.
And
it was an odd audition.
It was a very strange. We had to clear out a lot of tables and
work it out.
Yeah. But Tom basically said, "I'll give you Reggie if you give me Ron," and that was. Then we were off and running, and then try to figure out how to make that go away. That we didn't want it to turn into a gimmick.
Well, Tom, what was it about Ron that drew you at first, more so than Reggie?
Well, to be fair, I wanted to play both of them from the start, and I couldn't see one without the other, because neither of them, to me, I wanted to just do one of them. if that makes sense, where I'm at. I enjoyed the script and I enjoyed the characters as one, if that makes sense. But if I had to choose one and walk away from the table, then I would have gone with Ron, because there's more on the smorgasbord, as it were, to play with, with colours. There's a larger colour palette, which is, I suppose, more obvious in many ways, but at the same time, underneath those choices of the obvious, it's what you could do with it. If that makes sense. Is this microphone getting louder and louder? It's just growing, like a gas. Was that just me talking shit? So it was all the bells and tremblings and the whistles of a sort of loud Buffon clown type character, which can be earthed with a super intense realism when you get to a certain part of the character. So he's a very comic, loud, fully round, blossomed character, but there's an intrinsic sort of tragic clown to him, and I was looking for the moments to earth that. That's what drew me into it immediately. Whereas Reggie felt very straight, and if I only could play one character, it would have been Ronnie.
Question down here in the...
I'm Magda Maksimuk from Polish magazine Kino, and I have a question to Mr. Hardy. Here, there is also another film with you screened, and this is London Road, where you had weeks of preparation for your little singing part. I would like to ask about your preparation for the role in Legend, a very physical role. You've accustomed your viewers, audiences, to your very physical appearances in Bronson, Warrior, Mad Max. So how did the preparation for this one look like? Did it take a lot of time? Yes.
There had to be a very specific visual silhouette matched to primary sources that you see in photography from, say, the David Bailey shoot, the reportage of the twins there. So we already had a positive identification on the brothers that had to be then met to a certain degree. So that transformation takes a physical body transformation, and that goes right through costume and the makeup assets that we had as well, and to be able to differentiate the brothers too. Ronnie was a little bit bigger than Reggie, so that was something that we only had about 10 weeks prior to shooting when we made the decision we were going to go on the journey together. So the first thing was like, well, why don't we put on a load of weight first? I had to put up a little bit of weight to play Reggie anyway, but we wanted Ronnie to be a bit bigger and possibly a bit fatter as well, because as he got older, so there was a certain pallor and a water retention in his face that would have been ideal to get. To do that the harder way would have meant splitting the shoot up into 2 consecutive parts, as it were, and take us, the shooting dates to be over a longer period of time, and just isn't physically possible to do the body transformation on 2 separate brothers. So we had to cut our cloth to the next option, which was shoot both brothers at the same time, shoot them both on the same day, and find a way to switch between the 2 and what would be a significant silhouette and differentiation between the 2, which largely came down to with the Ronnie situation. Well, actually, with Reggie, we went with my teeth, which are really crooked, which was cool. And then Audrey and Chrissy and I sat down and we started to look at Ronnie's widow's peak in his hair, and looking at his full face, and looking at how we could, and his broken nose, and not just the glasses and the braces and the costume, which was another department, how we could make very subtle but effective differences between the 2 twins, and came up with a smorgasbord of options, which was all overlooked by Brian, until we finally sort of whittled it down to 2 specific looks. The costume for Ronnie was double fitted, so each shirt was twice the layer. He had waistcoats and double-breasted jackets, so he would look a little bit wider, had some heels and lifts, not high heels. I'm sure he had high heels somewhere, probably Judy Garland's. In fact, there was a scene where he did have Judy Garland slippers and Winston Churchill's bust, so in the car, but that's gone. Anyway, we didn't wear them on the day. I wore lifts. for Ronnie. So he had a slightly bigger frame, and there was something about him which was slightly more muscular and bullish. And then Reggie was kind of me, but with a shave and my hair combed and a bit of a bottle tan going on.
So then,
that's it, really.
In the filming, did you actually go back and forth as you were going along, or did you concentrate on the one character first and then refilmed everything again with the other character?
Generally, we shot the character who led the scene first, and most of the time it was Reggie, so we'd shoot Reggie first. But Tom, we rehearsed the scene first, and Tom would record Ron so that he could hear himself back, and so that Jacob Tamuri, who was a body double, could hear Ron. And just went step by step. And the biggest thing for Tom was he had no, Jacob stood in, but as far as an actor to vocally bounce off of and everything, he didn't have that. And he kind of had to go through all that in the morning before he ever even did it, in a way.
Yeah, well, a lot of acting comes from... My check. A lot of acting comes from reacting in, actually, from your other half. So it's a very dangerous situation to be in as a performer, is to create an acting in a bubble, which is technically what I was doing with myself. So it was imperative to have somebody to act opposite who could play both twins, who would not only provide me with this, would up the game. It's key that whoever's opposite ups the game for whoever the protagonist is. Otherwise, the status isn't given to him or her. That the actor can't just bring you status. That relies heavily on your ensemble. It's got nothing to do with how hard you perform. You cannot be the centre of attention unless other people allow you to be that. So that's where the ensemble and the team come in. So if I'm playing opposite myself, I'm pretty much out to lunch. I've got, out to sea and adrift. No matter how much attention I give myself, I'm not there for myself in reality. So to find somebody to play opposite was really hard. There was a moment where I wanted to get a really cool actor, this bloke called Howard Charles. I thought it would be awesome to play opposite. And he was unavailable. He was doing Musketeers, and then a body double in Jacob Tamuri, who's Mad Max, and significantly more Mad Max than I am, actually, and and more Ronnie Cray and Reggie Cray, to be fair, than I am, because he even ad-libbed some of the lines that stay in the film. Yeah. And he's had probably about 6 hours worth of acting training the night before, and he had to take on easily the hardest challenge I've ever done technically as an actor. And he rose to the occasion and played both brothers, and he's not even in the film. He's not here, and no one cares. So thanks, Jacob, wherever you are. Probably in New Zealand.
To pick up on that, Emily, how was it for you then playing opposite one version of Tom and then another version of Tom as the other brother?
Actually really wasn't. It wasn't a challenge for me at all, actually. I know that Tom put a lot of effort into it, but from where I was standing, it seemed completely effortless. It wasn't kind of a practical challenge for me. We just kind of had to do everything twice, but I felt like his transition back and forth between the two different characters was completely seamless, so I was just there. It wasn't an issue at all.
Right, we have a question down here.
I have a question for Tom. Well, actually, two questions. First one would be, do you get paid twice because you play two characters?
No. That's why I'm an executive producer, I think. Yes.
And the second question is that your character in the movie says, with patient, you don't get what you want.
That's not true, is it?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
There's your answer.
So how patient you are, and do you want to become a legend in Hollywood?
No. Not remotely interested in that sort of thing.
What were your expectations there starting up then?
What are my expectations?
Yes,
just to get a job was pretty cool, and I've now far exceeded my expectations, so I'm living on borrowed time. I only came to deliver a pizza, and I'm doing rather well, so I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Tom, so what do you look for then when you go from one role to the next? Are there specific things in the back of your mind that you want to play next, or is it just what happens to come along?
It's a bit of both, but whatever comes along, and it's interesting, exciting, that I might have fun. Key that I have fun, and that there are people that I want to work with, and it's a bit of a challenge. And something that's that is meaningful, whether that's the adventure itself of doing the project or the piece. I just like working, and I love working with really talented people, and I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. So there's no prerequisite for I must do this or achieve that, because I'm part of, and that's it really.
Getting back to Emily and Francis, who is the narrator of the piece, can you talk a bit about, Brian, about what made you decide to use Francis's point of view in order to unveil the story?
Yeah, well, sort of keying off what I said earlier, I was very curious about her and could only learn certain things about her, where she had been, and relationships on at least a basic level between her and Ron, and her and the mother, and I would elaborate on those things, but I try not to invent anything for her. And she, as much as I tried to find out about her, she remained a bit of a mystery. And on one level, I didn't feel that I wanted to invade that mystery when I didn't really know what I was doing, as far as how accurate I was or not. And the narration gave me a way to give her a separate voice, a voice from beyond the grave, that I did feel comfortable taking her in a direction that I don't know whether that's how accurate that was or not. So she has two voices, and she has her own voice as a character, and she has that voice as well, which is, I find it very interesting.
And so, Emily, how did you then prepare? Because Frances, there's so little known about her, and they were married for such a short time. How did you prepare to build the character?
I'm not very good at answering this question because I don't really have sort of a specific process. I have a tendency to overthink and over-intellectualize everything else in my life. When it comes to making films, it's the one thing that I don't really think about it that much. I read the script. She was there in the script. When I read it, obviously, Brian and I spoke about Frances a lot. I didn't want to do too much research on my own because it's hard to know what's true and what's gossip and myth, and so I kind of just was very happy to be led by Brian. And it sounds kind of weird and superstitious, but it's like, for me, it's a feeling. I just kind of, it's there and it happens and I feel it, and then when the camera stops rolling, I have no idea what I just did, but it's just that's how it works for me.
We have a question in the back.
I'm Graham Coleman from Daily Extra, and we're an LGBT news organization. And our question is for Tom Hardy. In the film, your character Ronnie is very open about his sexuality, but given interviews you've done in the past, your own sexuality seems a bit more ambiguous. Do you find it hard for celebrities to talk to media about their sexuality?
What on earth are you on about?
I was referring to an interview given to Attitude magazine a few years ago.
But what is your question?
I was wondering if you find it difficult for celebrities to talk about their sexuality.
I don't find it difficult for celebrities to talk about their sexuality. Are you asking me about my sexuality?
Sure.
Why?
Why?
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, all right. We'll leave that one aside. Let's talk a bit about recreating the period. It seemed to me that London hasn't really changed a lot, or that section of London hasn't really changed a lot. Was it easy or difficult to recreate the 60s?
It depends on your appetite as far as exteriors go. In a way, the scope of the film is interior. It's the nightclubs give it the scope, I think, and the scale. But it is very difficult to find that world, and it's a very patchwork. The art department seamlessly joined it all together, but Reggie and Ron and Francis lived around the corner from each other, but when Tom goes out his door, he's near Waterloo Station, and when he comes around the corner to Francis's house, he's in Greenwich, which is quite a distance. And I think that world is disappearing, and very, not to get technical, but you need both sides of the street to shoot, and you'd only find one, and you'd find streets that had been taken over and rebuilt, and were now, instead of being an East End neighborhood, it was $10 million flats and stuff like that, and neighbors wouldn't let you shoot there. And so there's many technical issues, but I think it's really getting harder and harder, and I think in 10 years to do this movie, you'd probably be on a lot more green screens than even we were, and which is a challenge, you know, to try to create it, but make it real and make a world that the audience can enter, which is also what a film should do, is you get to go to 1960s London with the Krays. But a long way of saying it's hard to make it all work, but doable.
Did you have to use a lot of green screen to do that?
No, well, it was at the sort of at the end of the street, so Valence Road, where they lived. It was a great 2 blocks, but Valence Road was a much longer street. So at the very end, where if you've seen the film, at the end of Reggie Street, there's a church. So 2 blocks down, there's a little green screen so that we can add the extra block in the church.
Yeah, a lot of that that neighborhood was bombed as well, so the houses are gone, and new builds are in the background. So in order to sort of piece together the period of the 60s, you have to try take little slices of small areas which are significantly different, and it's a bit like Williamsburg, I suppose, in some aspects. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to find the old school London now. So elongating the end of the road in that particular, there was a junction with heavy traffic with lots of buses going by and tube trains and whatnot. So you could see very clearly at the end of the road that there was a hip hop party or whatever was going on. We had to put a church there and extend the road by an extra 3 or 4 blocks as well to give a much larger scope. But there was very minimal green screen throughout the whole piece, actually, even with the brothers, which was where we thought we might actually have the most of it. I thought.
Tom, how familiar were you with the story of the Kray brothers? I know you played in Bronson a character who actually was a friend of one of the Krays at one point.
Oh yeah, technically, yeah.
They're
kind of one big happy family.
Yeah.
But England's quite small in that aspect, so our sort of criminal underworld. And
did you know much about their story before you came to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite hard to. As growing up in England as a young boy, I ended up in sort of the true crime fiction area or the true crime area, but even that's riddled with fiction. So I mean, especially when it comes to the Krays, and there's always a plethora of books on all of these characters, because we sort of, there's something since Charles Dickens really where we've always said Bill Sikes, we always kind of love an old crook or a villain, and we kind of love that in the UK. So there's lots of bits of pieces and secondary sources of people's stories about the Krays, and there's always I suppose tales and myths that usually are asinine that circulate about certain colourful characters which are in abundance, and something that we revel in as well, in not popular culture, but within our culture of fiction and fact. So I'd read and been around and seen things and heard stories about the Krays, and growing up in London, everybody's got pretty much a story or a take on them. So it was already. There was plenty to draw upon. The question was where to find the best stories or similar patterns which could take you closer to a primary source like a photograph, which is definitely guaranteed that's them. But stories are very different because they're there's no guaranteed fact in a story. So it was a question of researching that and looking for patterns after that and meeting people who knew them and grabbing diary extracts and unseen footage from Panorama, or meeting investigative journalists and stuff, and meeting the firm. And a lot of people come out of the woodwork when you start talking or saying you're going to do a biopic about them. You start to meet everybody, and they're more than happy to tell you a story, which is surprising for something that's so supposedly not talked about really, like gangsters and crime. You shouldn't really talk about it, I suppose, but they love to talk about it. So. Thank you.
Good question down here.
Yeah, from the Toronto Star. It's just pretty much following up on exactly what you've said there, Tom, but for Brian, how do you differentiate between fact and fiction with someone like the Krays when there's so many stories about them over the years?
Yeah, well, I found it impossible, really, and I don't present it as the truth about them, but it was my truth about them and all of our truths about them. Could you ask that question again? No, I lost myself.
How do you differentiate between fact and fiction whenever there's so many stories like?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But I thought it's kind of, it comes as what strikes me about that felt emotionally true, and there are gaps, and people know about this, and people know about that, but there's an event. Ron kills Cornell in the Blind Beggar. Everyone knows what night it happened. There's no doubt about that. But there's 20 stories as to what the bad blood was between Cornell and Ron, or even if there was bad blood. And you have to look at all those stories, and many of them are in complete disagreement with each other. But there's a truth in there somewhere. And my goal was to try to see if I could find what that truth was. In a sense, but the biggest thing was they're the protagonists of the film, and my biggest goal was to be on ground level with them, and not to look down on them and not to look up to them, but to be with them, and not to excuse them and apologize for them, which I'm very confident the film doesn't do, but to try to. The truth of the movie was to be with them and try to understand them and not demonize them, because I think demonizing them is boring, but to humanize them is much more compelling and interesting, and it makes it harder to judge them. And certainly people can judge them, and they were judged and they paid a heavy price for what they did, but once there's an understanding of them, I think that judging them becomes more difficult too, and it makes for a more compelling story, and that's really how I tried to approach it, rather than, I never thought I was the guy who was going to figure out the real truth.
Were there any stories that you kind of discovered were probably actually false, but you included anyway because there's maybe a shred of truth in them?
You know, I not really. There was an argument for and against them, but there's many times told is the story of that Reggie, the tickets to Ibiza that he bought the day that Frances killed herself, that he kept those in his cell until he died. And that, to me, was a very arresting story, but I've never seen the tickets. It's been told many times, but I don't know. I hope it's true. It's a great idea. But that was what it was. There's no way to know if that's actually true or not.
A question over there.
Hi, Nigel Smith with The Guardian. This is a question for Mr. Hardy. I was hoping to get you to comment on the making of The Revenant. The Hollywood Reporter published a piece a couple months back in which a crew member said shooting of it was a living hell, and I just wanted to see if you could say if that's an apt assessment or just clear the case for that film.
I think it makes great marketing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you think about it. That's for another time, though, isn't it? So did you say take a chance? On what? But we're here to promote Legend.
Oh, we'll keep this over here. Question over here then.
You can always write something nasty.
Actually, let's talk about the film and some of the visual aspects of it. Talk about some of the. A lot of the shots in the film are sort of framed through hallways or windshields or doorways. Is that, I mean, obviously you had that intention in your mind, but talk about what that did to convey the story or to...
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, sometimes if you're on a practical location and it's not a built set, you can't get big enough to get in the door for the shot. So sometimes you make it work for you artistically, what you have as far as a location. But I think what you say is true, and it is a sense for the audience to be watching. And I always thought a little bit of it was a sense of Frances watching. So you're back through the doorway, or you're up high looking down, and that kind of thing. But mostly, I think the camera is very still in the film, with a couple of exceptions. And I think it was because the camera didn't want to be aware of two Toms. The camera wants to, if we started to get fancy and pan from one face to the other face, then we're saying, hey, we know it's Tom playing both these guys, and we want to be neutral and not, the camera doesn't want to be aware of that. There's a big shot in the club where we follow Tom all through the club, or Reggie, I should say, and we very much wanted to do that in one because it showed him changing. I thought Reggie and the way Tom did it, it was Tom said something that I thought was very interesting, was he could never find the heart of Reggie. And I thought that was a very interesting and strong thing to say about him, and that in that particular instance, he's everything to everybody. He's one thing to the doorman, he's another thing to the guy at the bar, the people over here, to Frances as he's leading her through this world, to his guys, back around to this guy he has to deal with, and then back around again to be something else to Frances. And that was very suited to show how he had really multiple layers that he existed on. So it depends on the situation, I think, as far as, but when it was Reggie and Ron, we're very still, I think, and classic.
Okay, we've got time just for a couple more questions here.
For Latin America, I have another question for Tom. Why do you think that people love so much bad guys in a movie when they hate them in real life?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it's something to do with, well, for me anyway, I can only answer for myself, is that watching somebody genuinely say, I'm going to change the world around me to better suit my needs, as opposed to change myself to better to fit in with society, is something that's quite compelling, and something that ultimately I think all of us kind of would like to walk in those shoes for a day when they said, you know what, I'm just going to say no to any request made of me, or say, and do exactly what I want, and regardless of the consequences. And that place is safe in a theatre, is safe in a book, is safe in fantasy, and safe in the symbolic playing field of the mind, and in conversation and discussion. As soon as it becomes a real thing, and the consequences are genuine, then it no longer has the same compulsion. No matter how charismatic that world is, or these players are, these key figures, the consequences are genuinely of a very real nature, and immediately very abhorrent, and not something that we want. So, I think that's why people, or certainly I do, I like to watch characters who are rebellious, or will do what they want to do, or anarchic, or nihilistic, or a bit crazy, or off the wall, because it's something I'd love to do in real life, but I wouldn't do it because I feel responsible to participate in being a member of society, really. And I care about too many people, and I love too many people to want to hurt anyone or harm anyone. Do you know what I mean? I think it's impossible not to hurt people, but to harm, So I think that's quite compelling, and I think it's quite natural, and it's healthier to have that conversation in a safe place than to not. And to also be aware of that as part of the human condition as well. So I think, people who change things are fascinating, and passion can either create or destroy, and if that passion is in a certain agenda connected in a person, then that destruction is going to go in a specific way. I'm just glad I'm not that person doing that and having to live with those consequences, but watching it is, feeds the fantasy as opposed to the reality,
Okay, thank you. Legend is a TIFF Gala presentation. There are 2 more screenings at the festival. Press and industry screening on Thursday at the Scotiabank Theatre, and 1 more public screening Saturday, September 19th, and that one is at the Prince of Wales Theatre. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here.